Welcome to Hope and a Dose, the podcast where we explore the science, strategy, and collaboration shaping the future of cell and gene therapies. I'm your host, Louise Kearney. Today I'm joined by Sanjay Jain, Executive Director of Regulatory Affairs Strategy Consulting at Fortrea, for a practical and insightful look at the global regulatory landscape. Together we'll discuss how to plan early interactions with agencies, key similarities and differences between the US and Europe, the growing influence of regulators across the UK, Asia and beyond, common pitfalls in development, and the increasingly strategic role CROs play in navigating these complex pathways. Let's dive in. Hi Sanjay, thanks for joining today.
Thank you, Louise. I feel deeply honored to be here.
So our first question, what should our clients think about as they plan interactions with regulators on their cell and gene therapy assets?
I would say that the key areas for clients to focus on the development of these complex living medicines could be, firstly, draft and track a target product profile or TPP while keeping the end in mind, and as a planning tool to streamline the CGT's development. For example, for a gene therapy or GT with a proposed indication, include minimum and preferred targets for various attributes like efficacy, safety, route of administration, and dosing frequency, shelf life, etc. For quality, manufacturability with critical physical, chemical, biological, and microbiological attributes, scale and yield, impurities, cost, etc. can be included. For non-clinical, consider vector design and testing, efficacy and disease models, biodistribution and toxicology. For early clinical trials to assess safety, optimal dosing, and early signs in subjects, and pivotal trial to confirm efficacy and improving the disease and long-term safety can be considered. For market analysis, consider patient identification, pricing model, and health economics. This would also help in drafting a comprehensive or clinical development plan or CDP while keeping good laboratory manufacturing, distribution, clinical, and now artificial intelligence practices in mind. This could also build an optimal internal narrative. Secondly, proactive interactions with the regulatory agencies, example, Interact and pre-IND meetings with the US FDA, or early scientific advice from EU EMA, or parallel scientific advice are key to align on development strategies and avoid rework or even clinical hold in due course. Adopt a regulator's mindset in assessing what challenges they are tackling or balancing, example, scientific uncertainty and product novelty and consistency, serious unmet medical need, or long-term patient safety. Furthermore, build trust with them as scientific counterparts in development. Small details can signal team's dedication and specialist. Explore expedited development pathways for products addressing serious and unmet medical needs. Example, regenerative medicine, advanced therapy or RMET in the US, or priority medicine or PRIME in the EU. Thirdly, for chemistry, manufacturing, and controls, or CMCs, often dominant regulatory risk. Embrace the new 2026 FDA flexibility and CMC guidance, where clients can better navigate the complex regulatory landscape, reduce development risks, and accelerate the approval for their products. That is tailored approaches to commercial specifications and process validation. Prioritize robust functional potency assays early to define the strength of a cell and gene therapy. Document comparability to show that changes do not affect product key attributes, example, safety, identity, quality, purity, and potency. Define needs for genetically modified organisms or GMOs application. Define comprehensive shipping, handling, and chain of custody procedure, example for autologous products. Fourthly, for clinical strategy, align on the evidence package, not just the study design. Consider adaptive clinical trial designs that allow for direct assessment of efficacy, example, surrogate endpoints, and be prepared for long term safety. Use real world evidence or RWE to supplement data, example, a small patient population. The ethical concerns and safety monitoring remain vital, and discuss risk management explicitly. And finally, a global regulatory strategy why divergence or convergence approaches is necessary, as the agencies still have different and complex regulatory requirements across various regions.
Thanks. And I think the takeaway that I've got from this is that all the work you need to do ahead of first in human is always complex, but it just needs that extra amount of focus, and there's a bit more complexity for these kind of medicines. What are the similarities and differences when working on cell and gene strategies in the US and Europe?
Yeah, yes, you're right, Louis. So for the second question, yes, for me, the key similarities include that both the regions encourage early, frequent scientific advice and protocol assistance to align on study design, focus on treating rare diseases and oncology, offer several accelerated pathways at various stages of product development, example, orphan drug and breakthrough designation, conditional approval, incentives, and priority reviews for therapies addressing unmet medical needs. CMC is the dominant risk factor. Aspect rigorous CMC data using good practices or GXP, and increasingly comparability studies across clinical phases. And I would like to quote that formal US FDA commissioner quoted that in contrast to traditional drug review, where 80% of the review is focused on the clinical portion of that process, and maybe 20% is focused on the product issues, I would say that this is general principle that is almost completely inverted when it comes to cell and gene therapy. And we should keep this in mind all the time. They accept ongoing CMC change management and require extensive post marketing follow up to monitor long term safety. As far as the key differences are concerned, they include in the EU, these products are defined or classified as advanced therapy medicinal products or ATMPs, which is split into gene therapy, somatic cell therapy, tissue engineered products, and combined ATMP or an ATMP with a device. Whereas in the US, these are referred as biologics, including human gene therapy, cell therapy, and human cells, tissues, and cellular and tissue based products. A unified manufacturing approach is difficult due to differing GMP interpretations, example, for the manufacturing of plasmid, and different product classification, example, cell therapy in the US versus combined ATMP in the EU. The EMA typically requires more robust, longer term clinical evidence before granting marketing authorization, whereas the FDA generally provides faster approval paths but with more variability in accepted data, that is, more use of surrogate endpoints, and their pricing and reimbursement landscapes and market access and adoptions are different. So, in summary, design development plans to the highest common bar, which could not be the fastest path.
Yeah, you have to plan for everything in advance. And I think what I'm seeing at the moment is we're seeing cell and gene therapy research, which had traditionally maybe been in the US and EU, and we're seeing it move out to other parts of the world. So when we're thinking about that global regulatory strategy, any other regulators that we have to be mindful of?
Yes, of course. So many other key regulatory authorities have established framework for cell and gene therapies. To start with, the UK MHRA post Brexit has its own independent and stringent regulatory body. They are focused on accelerating approvals, aiming to reduce approval times significantly. Furthermore, these trials require MHRA, Human Tissue Authority, and Human Research Authority oversights. In Japan PMDA MHLW has progressive and specialized regulatory frameworks for regenerative medicine. The PMD Act allows for conditional time limited approval for regenerative products after early phase clinical trials if safety is confirmed and efficacy is predicted. Health Canada has a unique framework for biologics and relies heavily on risk based assessment for cell therapy. The regulatory landscape in China, NMPA and CDE is evolving rapidly to accelerate cell and gene therapy development. The CDE often provide specialized one enterprise, one policy guidance to accelerate development. South Korea MFDS offers an expedited review process for advanced regenerative medicines, and MFDS is recognized by WHO as a high performing regulatory authority. Singapore HSA offers a risk based and progressive regulatory pathway and listed as a WHO's listed authority at maturity level 4. I'm impressed for the regional collaboration. The Cogenti global pilot is expanding to help align international regulators to reduce duplication of efforts for gene therapies. And many nations, example Singapore, require a specific independent assessment for GMOs used in GT, separate from efficacy, often requiring genetic modification advisory committee approval.
Wow, so lots to think about all across the globe, and yeah, putting that strategy around from a global involves starting early, I should imagine.
Yeah, that's correct, Liz.
So, what are the common pitfalls in cell and gene therapy regulatory pathways?
Sure. So, briefly, major regulatory pitfalls in cell and gene therapy development include failing to engage with the regulatory agencies on their development strategies early on. It is highly recommended to engage the regulators early, and then failing to invest in CMC, especially for the manufacturing, leading to issues with consistency and scalability. Assays developed in academic settings often fail to meet stringent GMP requirements. Inability to properly identify, qualify, and validate potency assays. Modifying the manufacturing process between clinical phases without robust analytical and functional comparative data to prove that product remains the same. Navigating different standards across various regions for preclinical testing and good practices. Using traditional randomized trials for rare diseases is often unsuitable. Failure to use innovative designs and focused cohorts with appropriate biomarkers, and insufficient evidence regarding long-term safety, especially regarding vector setting, and inability to adequately address potential risks such as environmental or patient safety.
Thank you. And I think back to my experience, and I think probably every one of those things that you've mentioned has caused a hold up on a clinical study that I've worked at some point. So it's great to see it all put together. What is the contract research organization's role in regulatory strategy? How can we help?
Sure. So now clearly CROs play a vital role. They strategic role in development of cell and gene therapy by navigating complex, rapidly evolving global regulatory framework. They have clearly transitioned from service provider to essential solution provider, collaborator, or I would say catalysts to accelerate the path from research to market for these therapies. They stay up to date with the rapidly shifting cell and gene therapy regulatory guidelines, by doing the regulatory intelligence. They identify the potential gaps in the data and suggest workable solutions to overcome those. They develop comprehensive regulatory roadmap or strategies from supporting preclinical development to clinical trial approval and throughout the clinical development. They guide, prepare, and represent sponsors and meeting with regulatory authorities to address specific concerns. They also assist in securing a special designation, things like example FDA's RMAT. They identify and reduce regulatory risks associated with immunogenicity, potential of target toxicity, and complex delivery methods. They ensure regulatory compliance, for example, from win to win logistics for cell therapy, which is critical for autologous products. They prepare, publish, submit, and maintain regulatory documents, example, USIND. They manage the requirement for long term safety monitoring and surveillance. And last but not the least, some CROs have specialized units that integrate regulatory advice with the operational delivery.
Yeah, I think that link between regulatory and operational is really key and something that we work on together. Thank you, Sanjay, so much today. I think there's so much to consider when you're looking at your regulatory pathway and how to plan for that. So I just want to say thank you for the work to try and get this all in a format suitable for a podcast. So thank you, Sanjay.
Thanks a lot for giving me this opportunity. Much appreciated. Thank you.
Thanks for joining me on this episode of Hope in a Dose. Today we explored how to think like a regulator and, starting with the end in mind, can shape smarter, more resilient development strategies for cell and gene therapies. From global expectations to common pitfalls and the evolving role of the CRO, it's clear that success comes from the intentional planning and the right partnerships. If today's conversation is helpful, please follow the series, share this episode with colleagues, or reach out with topics you'd like to explore next. Together we can keep advancing the future of these transformative therapies. Until next time.